Chapter 14. Rest Here. The slimes stir awake, rising from the puddles they were. Grex, who was placed in a tin cup, is slow to rise, whereas Astegon is quicker to don his clothes that were placed on top of a wooden table. To both of their surprise, they didn't wake to find themselves in a prison cell. No stone floors or chilling, dreadful vibe. Instead, a warm wooden log cabin that held no pictures and very little furniture, as if it had just been left behind by a moving family. A fresh fire was stoked in a stone chimney where Thelos sat, stirring the logs with an iron poker. Grex, feeling naked, slips out of the tin cup, and right behind him he spots his nearly destroyed and crumpled suit of armor. He glugs at his brother and then slips into his suit as Astegon adjusts his sheath around his hips. The brothers were alive, but the way Thelos' eyes kept staring at the fire, they knew it wasn't over, and they had plenty of questions. The two brothers startle at the sight of the runes on their armor and orb beginning to light up and glow faintly, just enough to finally drag Thelos' attention back to the slimes. Standing up from his chair, he approaches the two slimes in a merry stride as they groan and gurgle into position. Astegon stands beside, but slightly in front of Grex, while his brother is amazed at all of the runes shifting colors that they hadn't before.
"Did we close the rift?"
the brothers ask the elf simultaneously. Thelos exhales slowly.
"Not to say that you failed. You are both being hailed as heroes for stabilizing the rift. No new tears should be opening across Thelos, but—"
he folds his hands behind his back, measured as ever.
"It is my hypothesis that one more attempt, with greater Arcana backing you, empowering the runes you now bear, could seal it for good."
The brothers look at one another, surprised.
"More mages?"
Astegon asks, moving to lean against the wall, arms folding as he processes the thought.
"Well, Commander Colin believes the Paladins of Order could dampen the rift further,"
Thelos says carefully.
"But I do not find that plausible."
Grex steps forward, ready to question him, but before he can let out so much as a glug, a rune within his armor flares bright blue. Crack! A miniature rift splits open in the air between the three of them. All of them freeze. It isn't like the one on the mountain. No screaming membrane, no demonic limbs clawing through. Inside this rift swirls a vast, empty expanse, clouds drifting through an endless sky, silent and untouched. Grex stares. Curiosity strikes him harder than caution ever could. The metal behemoth slowly extends his arm into the tear, and behind him, another rift cracks open in answer. His fist emerges from it, lightly tapping the black cloak draped across his back.
"Brother, the weave has touched me too now,"
Grex exclaims, unable to hide his excitement. The two brothers have both been marked by the weave now, and the realization makes the mage before them light up with joy. Astegon, however, looks more shocked than anything at his brother's sudden development.
"Yes. The stabilization of the rift and being blasted by its weave must have finally granted you its touch. Fascinating,"
Thelos says, eyes gleaming with scholarly wonder. Grex withdraws his arm, and the two miniature rifts immediately snap shut, vanishing as if they had never existed.
"Staying on topic, though,"
Grex continues, more serious now,
"I believe the Paladins should be given their try. Snuffing out a flame is better than potentially fueling it. Besides, I believe Colin and his men made it far easier to stabilize the rift atop the mountain than any mages did."
Thelos' expression hardens. He shoots Grex a sharp glare, clearly insulted that the green slime fails to see his contribution. Astegon steps in before the tension can deepen.
"Not to make an ordeal or argument out of this, brother," he says evenly, "but arguably this is an Arcana problem, one that should be solved with Arcana, and without Thelos we wouldn't even be here in the first place. We certainly wouldn't have stabilized the rift."
His tone is steady, diplomatic. He does not dismiss Grex's suggestion, but neither will he allow Velus's role to be diminished. The fire in the hearth crackles softly between them, and the decision still hangs in the air.
Well, either way, I've been told that as soon as the two of you woke, the Lord Seeker needs to speak with you. Luckily, it didn't take 3 days for you to awaken. Just a measly 1. Phew. Either way, he'll be at Central Keep. It's not far from here. I'll accompany you, Velus said, motioning the slimes toward the door.
As they step outside, Velus closes the cabin behind them, and the three head into the now far merrier streets of Haven. The merchant's stalls remain closed, but construction fills the backdrop. Damaged buildings are being repaired. Halfling and Dragonborn work tirelessly, hauling timber and stone, reinforcing what had nearly been lost. The city breathes easier now, but deep inside the two brothers, uncertainty lingers. They know the rift is not fully sealed. They know dangers spread across Thelos, wherever its demonic weave has touched. This peace feels fragile. Still, they cannot ignore the stares. Star-filled gazes follow them. Whispers of praise ripple around every corner they turn.
"Are we heroes?"
Grex asks as they walk forward.
"Blob, we're tools that serve their purpose,"
Astegon responds in their own tongue.
"Blob, and these humans appreciate their tools."
He then turns and waves at a child who beams at the sight of them.
"Yes, we are, Grex,"
Astegon adds in common. But Grex knows what his brother truly thinks, and it dampens the green slime's mood, though not entirely. Seeing people smile at him fuels something inside him, and for now, that is enough. It wasn't long before the three of them stood before the iron gates guarding Central Keep. From where they stood, the trio could see a white marble manor with wooden accents and polished windows that reflected the afternoon light. It looked elegant, almost modest, but carried quiet authority. 2 paladins stood at the gates, each armed with a polearm. When their helms turned toward Astegon and Grex, they couldn't help but smile. Beneath the metal were bandages and familiar faces, the same paladins who had helped the slime stabilize the rift atop the mountain. Without hesitation, the paladins pulled the iron gates open wide. Astegon stepped forward proudly, and as they crossed the threshold, they were met with a long red carpet trimmed in pitch black, stretching all the way to a set of double wooden doors fitted with polished golden knobs. In a subtle flourish, Astegon's hands ignited with 2 pale blue runes. A controlled gust of wind surged behind him, slamming the iron gates shut with a resonant clang. Velus raised a brow, impressed to see the blue slime practicing his magic with such precision. Grex, however, tilted slightly, wondering why his brother had chosen to close the gates so decisively. As they approached the doors, Velus fell silent behind them. Muffled voices leaked through the wood. Raised tones, sharp interruptions, squabbles, arguments. The brothers exchanged a glance. Astegon summoned the runes to his palms once more. With an explosive gust of wind, the double doors slammed open.
"Lord Seeker Colin, didn't I tell you to execute those criminals?"
Lord Chancellor Fedric shouts into Colin's face. Colin stands firm, frustration evident but controlled, his hand resting steadily on the pommel of his sword.
"I don't see why we are even entertaining discussion with them," Fedric continues sharply. "They so obviously failed at closing the breach."
"I don't believe they failed."
Colin's chest rises as he gestures toward the 2 slimes standing in the doorway.
"They did all that they could. If they had pushed any further, they would have died."
Fedric crosses his arms stiffly and finally looks toward the brothers. His eyes land on Grex. A visible shudder rolls up his spine, but despite that instinctive fear, he sneers, cold and aristocratic, at the 2 slimes. Colin walks forward, and the interior of the chamber fully reveals itself to the brothers. Portraits line the walls, men and women, mages and paladins alike. Figures the brothers cannot name, yet instinctively understand to be important. Candlelight flickers along the edges of the room, while a grand chandelier of hanging white crystals illuminates the massive wooden table at its center. The brothers and Frederick follow Colin toward it. The Lord Seeker reaches into his leather satchel and pulls out a tome. It is pristine and smooth, worn only at the edges by reverent handling. At the center of its cover rests a red flower, unmistakable. Grex's expression doesn't change, but something inside him sharpens. His metaphorical eye widens at the sight of the flower.
"Lord Chancellor Frederick," Colin says evenly, slamming the tome onto the table. "Do you recognize this?"
Frederick's face drains of color. Recognition flashes across it immediately, but his lips tremble, as though curses press against his teeth, yet he dares not speak them.
"This," Colin continues, "was once the holiest of tomes, signed by the last pope, Justin Forb. With it came the affirmations of my authority and Vivian's to inform the conclave."
Colin steps closer and jabs a firm finger into Frederick's chest.
"We are going to find enough power to close the breach for good, with or without you."
Frederick scoffs, though the sound lacks its earlier bite. He shrugs Colin off and turns sharply, making for the doors.
"Coward!"
Grex's deep voice rumbles through the chamber. The human chancellor visibly quivers at the sound, quickening his pace toward the door, only to clip Astegon's shoulder on the way out. Astegon knows he shouldn't cause the man harm, but seeing Grex angered and Colin finally standing up to Frederick, something in the blue slime decides his own statement should be made. As Frederick's back turns, a glowing blue rune reappears in Astegon's palm. It flares brightly. A sudden gust of wind slams the door shut behind the fleeing chancellor. Astegon lets out a small blub of a chuckle at the thought of Frederick stumbling, shivering, and humiliated outside. Colin exhales.
"Pardon that, and thank you. I appreciate the two of you being here,"
he says, his tone shifting from confrontation to weary sincerity.
"You're both going to need to be at your strongest for what happens next, but for now, how are you feeling?"
He leans back against the table with a heavy sigh, hip resting on its edge. His shoulders slump. His arms fold across his chest, but it isn't defensive. It's exhaustion. His eyes look as though they long for sleep, as though he's fighting to remain present just for this conversation. Frustration and worry sit heavy on his broad shoulders.
"Good,"
Grex answers first, surprising Astegon. The green slime gestures reassuringly toward Colin with a thumbs up. Astegon remains still, his posture giving nothing away. "Just woke up," Astegon says evenly, crossing his arms. "And glad to see you, Lord Seeker."
"I'm glad," Colin says evenly, "but unfortunately, that is not how I would have preferred that conversation to end."
He does not look at the brothers when he speaks. His gaze remains fixed on the closed door across the chamber, as though he can still see through it, past stone walls and courtyard banners, to where Lord Frederick now departs the grounds of the Conclave's base in Haven. The faint echo of retreating boots seems to linger in the silence he leaves behind.
"Lord Frederick may not have much sway within the chantry,"
Colin continues, voice measured, diplomatic.
"But his voice carries weight among the survivors who stood upon that mountain. The day that was meant to be a peace treaty."
The words hang heavy. The mountain, the failure. Colin exhales, long and controlled, before rising to a full stance. He places one hand upon the tome resting at the center of the table, a thick, leather-bound volume stamped with the sigil of the Conclave. His fingers press into it as if steadying himself.
"It is unfortunate that we have upset him," he says at last.
but there is nothing to be done about it now. Creak! 2 doors open at opposite ends of the circular chamber. The sound draws every eye. From one doorway steps a woman the brothers recognize immediately. From the other, someone new. They approach the table in measured strides, their footsteps echoing faintly beneath the vaulted ceiling.
"Allow me to introduce you properly," Colin says, gesturing with an open palm. "Vivian, whom you have already met twice, though perhaps not under ideal circumstances."
His hand shifts.
"And this is Lady Julian."
Vivian offers a composed, knowing smile, her posture immaculate as ever, chin lifted, shoulders squared, eyes sharp with quiet appraisal. But it is Julian who commands the room's momentum. She is radiant in a bright blue, exquisitely tailored dress that catches the light with every step. Intricate silver jewelry winds through the fabric, delicate chains and filigree threading from her waist up along her sleeves, glinting like frost. The craftsmanship is precise, expensive, intentional. Her arms are stacked high with parchment, paper, scrolls, ledgers, and neatly bound spreadsheets. Ink marks stain her fingers. She does not slow. She reaches the table and drops the entire stack in one sharp motion. The impact sends pages sliding and fanning outward across the polished surface. Inked columns, stamped seals, maps, casualty reports, supply routes, all scatter between the brothers and Colin. Julian adjusts her glasses with 2 quick fingers. Then she pushes them higher along the bridge of her nose with a firm, impatient motion. Without looking up, she begins sorting. Blonde hair spills down her back until, with a swift and practiced motion, she gathers it and ties it into a tight ponytail. Efficient, unceremonious. Her attention never leaves the documents before her. She does not greet Grex. She does not acknowledge Astegon. "Hi, I'm Julian," she says briskly, still not fully looking up. "The diplomat. I was Pope Justin's go-to politician." She moistens her thumb and flicks through another stack of parchment with sharp, efficient snaps. Pages whisper against one another in rapid succession. The sound catches Grex's attention. His helm tilts slightly. The parchment edges look thin, fragile, softened by ink and handling. There is a texture to them that seems chewable. A low, involuntary gargle rolls through his core. Astegon hears it. Of course he does. His gaze shifts sideways just enough to catch the angle of Grex's helmet. The subtle lean toward the paperwork, the faint suction sound. Astegon says nothing. There will be time to eat, later, when politics are not being laid bare across a war table. Now is not that time. Julian spreads her arms wide and slams open a final sheet across the center of the table. A map. "Thelos," she states simply. The parchment stretches nearly the full width of the table. Inked in meticulous detail, the land is divided cleanly down its center by a jagged mountain spine that runs from north to south like a scar. To the west, structured borders, clean roads, fortified cities. The capital's domain, ordered, governed, dense with heraldic marks and trade routes. To the east, fewer roads, fewer walls, vast forests and broken highlands. The eastern wilds, untamed. Colin steps forward, one hand braced on the table as he leans over the map. He points firmly to the eastern half. Julian and Vivian move in tandem. From small velvet pouches, they withdraw miniature figurines, delicately carved tokens no taller than a thumb. Some shaped like tiny blackened spires twisted in unnatural angles, others like modest houses. A few like watchtowers. They begin placing them carefully across the eastern wilds, one by one. Rifts, towns, villages. Grex watches the board transform. Vivian's fingers hover above the dark spires. As she traces over them, faint arcs of light shimmer briefly around each marker, illuminating them in soft violet glow.
Each rift you see on this map, she says, her voice smooth and precise, is a hell portal, or at least each one my scouts have confirmed through first-hand observation. Her finger taps one figurine near the mountain divide. A pulse of dim crimson light flickers from it. There's every possibility more exist, unreported, undiscovered, especially in regions too dangerous for patrols to survive long enough to send word. She lifts her hand. The glowing markers dim, but do not fully extinguish. They throb faintly, like distant embers. But, she continues, eyes lifting to the brothers, it is my working theory that no new rifts are forming. A pause. Her gaze lingers deliberately. Not since you two stabilized the tear. And we alone can't close the rift, so we'll need to gather more forces to help, right? Astegon asks, stepping forward and pointing at some of the landmarks on the eastern side of Thelos.
We should give aid to those surrounded by the rifts,
Grex states, as he lands his stubby-clawed finger on a couple of structures that look to be a log cabin that was next to other miniatures of rifts. Well, you're not far off, but currently most of the conclave has been disbanded, and the few remnants had fled to the capital. And as far as I know, that's where the rest of the paladins are too, but the capital will never let us into the borders. Astegon looks over at Vivian, and then at Colin. But why? Innocent people are dying. Shouldn't they come out and help the eastern lands that look to be plagued with the rifts? Astegon asks as Grex stands up straight and goes behind Astegon. Rumors have traveled and made roots very quickly in the capital that you two are the very cause of the Cataclysm, and so refuse to send help till you two are out of the picture. Rumors that they all believe have a sturdy base to stand on. Vivian states, as she walks around the table and stands right next to Colin, just a few feet away from the two brothers. But I know that you two aren't the cause, that you're the solution, and I'd be a fool if it meant that you two aren't the saviors that we needed. Yeah, Julian says quietly, not looking up at first. The scratch of her quill slows, then stops. She lifts her eyes over the rim of the parchment, gaze sharp despite the fatigue lining it. Otherwise, more and more rifts will continue to swallow up Thelos whole. Her fingers tighten around the feathered shaft, knuckles paling. So it is of the utmost importance that we get the main rift sealed or destroyed. A brief pause. Her eyes flick between the brothers. And we need both of you. She lowers her gaze again, but her jaw remains set as she resumes writing, faster now, as if trying to outrun the weight of her own words. Colin exhales through his nose and pushes off the edge of the war table.
As of right now, he begins, voice measured but firm. We need to build sway, enough to enter the capital without being turned away, or worse.
He shifts the marker across the map, the wood scraping softly against parchment, and plants it over a sketched mountain range.
And to gather more forces.
He leans forward, bracing both palms against the table. The candlelight catches the lines etched deep around his eyes.
So, while we iron out a more detailed plan,
he taps the monastery icon twice.
We're going to send you to the Direlands.
The word hangs heavy in the air.
You'll meet with Mother Isabel and bring her back here to Haven.
His gaze lifts to meet theirs, searching their faces for any flicker of hesitation.
She is one of the highest-ranking members of the Church who survived the Cataclysm. Her voice still carries weight, more than ours.
Astegon shifts, the faint hum of his orb pulsing at his side. His brow furrows, lips pressing into a thin line. Why is this necessary right now? He asks, though his tone carries more tension than defiance. His fingers curl slightly, as though resisting the urge to cross his arms. Colin straightens slowly. For a moment he studies Astegon as if weighing how much to say. Then he steps away from the table and begins to pace, boots thudding softly against the stone floor.
Because we're going wide, he replies, not narrow, not desperate.
He gestures with both hands, palms open. Many rogue and deserted paladins of the Order roam without banners. Mages from the Circle scatter like embers after a fire. They're fractured, suspicious, waiting for something to believe in. He stops pacing and turns sharply back toward them. And neither side will rally for creatures that are myth and rumor. His eyes flick between Grex and Astegon, not unkind, but unflinching. Right now, that's what you are to them. Silence settles, thick but not hostile. We need to give them something solid, Colin continues, voice lowering but growing more intense. A reason to stand beside you instead of hunting you. That means influence, visibility, proof. He taps a finger against the map again, this time more gently. Mother Isabel is a big player. If she stands with us, if she stands with you, it changes the conversation. Julian finally sets her quill down completely. She folds her hands atop her notes, eyes thoughtful. If the Order sees one of their highest surviving leaders endorsing you, she adds, they'll hesitate before calling you heretics. And if the Circle sees the Church aligning with Rift-bearers rather than condemning them, they'll reconsider their stance. Colin nods once. If we get both sides, even better. A faint, tired smirk ghosts across his face. But right now, we start with building rapport, one pillar at a time. Okay, understood. Astegon inclines his head once, decisive, already moving past the weight of the discussion. Then we'll go right now. There's no hesitation in him. The orb inside of him emits a faint, steady thrum as he turns on his heel. Grex follows immediately, heavy boots echoing against the stone floor, as the brothers stride toward the chamber doors with the kind of forward momentum that suggests the matter is already settled in their minds. Please, you need to be escorted. Colin's voice cuts through the scrape of armor and cloth. He moves quickly. In 3 long strides, he's beside them, one hand lifting as if to physically halt their departure before thinking better of it. He falls into step instead, matching their pace. Astegon slows half a fraction, just enough to acknowledge him without fully stopping.
Oh, can we choose who escorts us?
Grex asks. He peers down at Colin from behind the shadow of his helm, the dim candlelight catching along the ridges of his armor. There's a subtle shift in his gravelly tone, something almost eager, almost boyish beneath the bass rumble. His shoulders square with a faint lift, as if he's already picturing it. Colin glances sideways at him, one brow arching. I'm going to be escorting the both of you, whether or not you like it, he replies dryly, adjusting the leather strap across his chest as he walks. But I assume you have someone else in mind?
The elf and the halfling,
Grex states plainly. Astegon's eyes flick toward his brother at that. A brief crease forms between his brows. Strategically, it made sense. More blades, more magic, more eyes on the road. But the halfling? His lips twitch as if he's about to object, then flatten again. He exhales softly. If Grex was comfortable with it, then so was he. Colin rubs at his temple with 2 fingers, considering.
Well,
he mutters, those 2 should be at the bar. A faint smirk tugs at his mouth despite himself.
Let's go recruit them to our cause.
The trio exits the central keep, heading their way to the pub where 2 drunk adventurers await them, mugs in hand and cheeks already the color of pink roses. That halfling does owe me one, Astegon says with a chuckle. Chapter 15. Steeds for Purpose. The Lazy Lounger was the only tavern in Haven that didn't seem to understand what morning meant. Gray dawn light stretched thin across the cobbled streets, the sky still bruised from night, yet laughter already poured through the tavern's swinging doors. Not the wild roar of midnight chaos, but the thick, hazy laughter of people who had simply never gone home. The smell hit before the sound did. Ale, smoke, spilled stew, damp wood. Just outside, the Slime Brothers and Colin paused as two elves inside clinked their mugs together. Dink! They downed their drinks in 2 heavy gulps, foam streaking their sharp chins while a small cluster of sleepless patrons cheered them on with hoarse approval. Colin inhaled deeply, the scent of old ale settling into his lungs. He smiled faintly. The air inside was stale, yes, but alive. After weeks of tension, planning, and whispered fears about rifts and ruin, the sound of people laughing at sunrise felt defiant. He enjoyed the sight of peace. Astegon and Grex, however, did not linger. They pushed through the swinging doors, the hinges creaking as the morning light cut briefly across the tavern floor, before being swallowed by warmth and shadow. Inside, the lazy lounger looked like a battlefield that had chosen celebration instead of bloodshed. Round wooden tables were cluttered with half-empty mugs, crumbs, and cards mid-game. A few patrons slumped forward asleep, arms folded over the wreckage of their revelry. Others were wide awake, riding the tail end of their drink with glassy-eyed enthusiasm. A hearth still burned low, embers glowing orange against the dim interior. In the corner, a red-skinned tiefling bard sat at a slightly out-of-tune piano, her long tail swaying lazily as her fingers carried a softer morning tune. Not a riotous melody, something playful but gentler, as if easing the tavern back into the day. She winked at a trio of elven sisters, attempting to sip water and look dignified, though their flushed cheeks betrayed a sleepless night.
"Why, ain't it newcomers?"
The voice rolled across the tavern like a drumbeat, deep, rich, unmistakably feminine, cutting clean through the piano's melody and the low murmur of hungover laughter. Heads turned. From between the crowded tables emerged a heavy-set woman built like a fortress wall, balancing trays upon trays upon trays of brimming mugs. Bronze plates rested along her forearms and shoulder with impossible steadiness. Not a drip spilled despite the uneven planks beneath her boots. She stopped before the Slime Brothers and Colin, flashing a wide, perfectly straight white smile that seemed almost too pristine for a tavern this worn.
"Colin,"
she greeted warmly, shifting one loaded tray onto her hip with a practiced roll of her wrist.
"Ain't it always a pleasure to see you in my establishment?"
Colin's expression softened, the hard strategist melting briefly into something more familiar.
"Hilda," he replied, dipping his head, "business looks lively."
"Lively?" she snorted. "Honey, this place survived the Cataclysm. A few cracked ribs and rifts in the sky ain't scaring off my regulars."
Her eyes drifted to Grex. A blush crept across her cheeks before she could stop it. She cleared her throat, shifting her weight as though redistributing more than just the trays. Then her gaze moved to Astegon. The blush faded, replaced not by coldness, but by respect, measured, acknowledging.
"Well now,"
she said, looking between the two unique figures.
"These must be those 2 troublesome men that stayed off the Cataclysm."
A few nearby patrons leaned subtly closer.
"Quite an astute observation, Hilda,"
Colin replied smoothly as he plucked a mug from one of her bronze plates. Foam licked the rim as he lifted it.
"Yes, these are the men who
stabilized the rift." The word stabilized traveled. A murmur followed it like wind through tall grass. Astegon didn't bask in it. His eyes were already moving, scanning the tavern's corners, exits, shadows between tables.
"We're here looking for a halfling,"
he said evenly, voice carrying without being loud.
"Rough around the edges, and an elven mage who'd be accompanying him."
Hilda's grin widened knowingly.
"Why, yeah,"
she said, jerking her chin toward the back corner.
"Couple gents that fit that description are holed up in the cushioned booth. Been there since last night. Or maybe the night before." She winked. "Hard to keep track." She shifted the trays again. "Can I get you anything else, my dears?"
"I'll take them their drinks,"
Grex said, voice gravelly but polite. His large hands moved with surprising delicacy as he lifted 3 mugs from her stacked plates without tipping a single one.
"And one for myself."
Hilda raised an impressed brow. "1 jug of water," Astegon added without hesitation. Hilda gave a theatrical bow, trays still balanced, before pivoting smoothly and disappearing toward the bar to fetch it. The trio made their way toward the back corner. The booth there was half hidden behind a support beam and a crooked lantern. Cushions sagged beneath 2 figures, surrounded by a battlefield of empty glasses. Mugs, pitchers, and shot cups towered across the table in a precarious mountain of bad decisions. Thelos spotted them first. The elf's sharp eyes flicked up mid-sip, catching the unmistakable figures approaching through the dim tavern light. His lips twitched faintly, though whether from amusement or concern was hard to tell. Beside him, Dredge the halfling remained blissfully unaware, mostly because he could barely see over the mountain of glasses stacked before him. Only the top of his tousled hair and the rim of his mug were visible from the other side. Grex carefully lowered the drinks onto the table, wood clinking against wood. The stack wobbled. Dredge blinked as a shadow fell over him. Slowly, he leaned to one side to peer around the glass fortress he'd built, and froze when he found himself staring up at 2 very familiar figures. The halfling squinted.
"My, what brings you 3 here?"
Thelos asks as his face is flushed, but his eyes knew the answers that his lips were asking. Grex places a mug in front of Thelos and Dredge and holds a single mug in the palm of his hand.
"We've came to formally invite you to join our party,"
Grex states as he opens one of the panels in his helm and throws back the ale in one throw. Excited till the ale went inside of him, where an unpleasant feeling struck him.
"Why, it wasn't hard to get a few coins,"
Dredge says as he hiccups and slams back the fresh new mug in front of him.
"Coins? Why, I wouldn't throw away such an opportunity to help the saviors of Haven and possibly the nation,"
Thelos states as Hilda walks over with the jug of water and slams it down beside Astegon.
"Ha! I knew that one of you would be a lightweight,"
Dredge laughs out as he pokes fun at Astegon. That is, till the blue slime sticks his finger in the jug and instantly slurps up its contents in one gulp. The halfling immediately drops his jaw, and then in the next breath laughs with joy.
"And I was wrong. I'm guessing we leave at this moment's notice then. Or might I and the elf here know where we are heading?"
"We head to the Direlands to seek out Mother Isabel," Astegon states flatly. The small accidental release of air does little to undermine the gravity in his voice. He stands upright, shoulders squared, hands resting lightly at his sides, as though already bracing for the road ahead. Dredge stiffens.
"The Direlands?"
Dredge repeats, the humor draining from his face. He sets his mug down harder than necessary, ale sloshing over the rim.
"Do you know how dangerous that stretch of woods is? There's a war going on out there. Deserted paladins clashing with rogue mages. Nobody trusts nobody. Nobody's safe."
His fingers drum against the table now, not drunkenly, but anxiously.
"Oh, they're aware,"
Colin replies calmly, before taking a measured sip of his ale. He doesn't rush, doesn't flinch. Hence why I'm accompanying them. He lowers the mug and fixes Dredge with a steady look. It's a long ride, and a longer negotiation if things go poorly. I need these 2 ready to travel. His tone shifts into command with ease. "Meet us at the gates in an hour. We stop at the stables first." He gives Thelos a respectful nod, one professional to another, then looks down at Dredge. "Try to arrive sober enough to sit a saddle." Thelos chuckles softly.
"Best we go then,"
the elf says, rising smoothly from the booth despite the faint sway in his step. He adjusts his cloak, brushing crumbs from the fabric with meticulous fingers.
See the three of you at the gates.
He offers a small wave as Colin, Grex, and Astegon begin to step away. Dredge watches them leave, eyes narrowing slightly as he leans toward Thelos.
What size of horse, he mutters under his breath, does Lord Seeker think will befit that metal behemoth?
His gaze lingers on Grex's broad, armored frame. Thelos follows his line of sight and smiles knowingly.
Oh, you'll see, my friend, the elf replies quietly. Colin is about to give those two a gift outright.
Across the tavern, Astegon raises a hand to flag down Hilda once more.
One more jug of water,
Astegon calls. Hilda laughs from behind the bar.
At this rate, I'll just roll the barrel over to you.
Grex, meanwhile, pauses near the door. He glances back at the booth where Thelos and Dredge remain seated. For a moment, the tavern noise fades around him. There's something warm that stirs inside the green slime. Not ale this time, but something quieter. Curiosity, hope, the thought of not walking into danger alone. Dredge notices the look and snorts lightly.
Hope whatever that thing rides is as strong as he,
the halfling mutters as he pulls a dagger from his belt. He shines the blade carefully against his sleeve, inspecting the edge with pride. The steel catches the morning light filtering through the dusty windows. A grin creeps across his face.
Can't wait to bury this beauty in some demon skulls.
Thelos arches a brow,